When I started out on this project, I had two objectives. The first of them was to reuse or upcycle plywood that was lying around the shop and other pieces of wood, and the second objective was to use the lathe. I bought this lathe about a year ago, and up till that time, I'd never actually used a lathe before. As a boy growing up, I had learned woodworking in a wood shop, but I had never used a lathe. I suppose the main reason was it's fairly dangerous, and there weren't very many of them around either. As a matter of fact, when I was a boy, I wasn't so much into woodworking. I much preferred pottery, so I did that a lot more. And the interesting thing about working on a lathe is that compared to the other woodworking machines, well, there's really nothing like it. Working on a lathe is far more... working on a lathe is much more like throwing a pot in a pottery, on a potter's wheel, than it is working on a table saw or a bandsaw or using a hand plane or whatever. The primary difference between a lathe and any other woodworking machine, I mean, anybody who's used a lathe will know this, but so talking to other people who haven't, the primary difference is really that with a lathe, the material, the wood, is turning, and the cutting tool is still, whereas with a bandsaw or a table saw, it's the other way around. Yeah, the tool is moving, and the wood is stationary. Yeah, so a bandsaw blade is cutting, but that's the technical aspect of it. The aspect that's really interesting for me is that turning wood is really a sculptural experience. You've got this piece of wood that's spinning around, and you're shaping it in this very sculptural way, and it's a lot of fun. I really like working on a lathe, I have to say. It's dangerous, obviously, and it's very important to be careful. You don't want to get hurt, but it's just lots and lots of fun, and making this stool seat. Like I said, I started out reusing this plywood, and I had this very specific design in my mind. But once I had made one of them, I also started making others using different kinds of wood I had, in the shop. So instead of using these scraps of plywood, I used, a whole piece of ash. I made one out of walnut too. They're not finished yet, but and I have to say, the ability to shape the wood, but then also to sand it down very fine and polish it. That's so much fun. It kind of really brings out the best of the wood, I've found, in a way that's really not comparable to any other machine. I mean, obviously, it's easy to... it's not easy, but it's possible to make really beautiful things using other woodworking tools. But for me, the lathe is by far my favorite machine in the shop, just because, but mostly because of, I think for me, because of this aspect that it's very similar to throwing pots on a wheel. This rotary aspect makes it a lot of fun. The most difficult part of this project were the legs. um, attaching the legs and making the supports, the joints for those supports and so on. I didn't want to have a traditional joint from the leg to the stool that goes through the stool seat, simply because I like how the stool seat looks as it is without that joint coming through. I don't really have anything against a visible joint, but that I didn't think that would be appropriate for this design. So that's why I ended up milling out some aluminium inserts and then using that to attach the legs to the bottom of the seat. And then I have I made these dovetail joints for these cross beams under between the legs to add stability. And that was really the trickiest, just getting all the angles right and setting up the CNC so that it would work. It was a lot of fun, but I don't think it would make sense if I was making a lot of these tools. So in the future, I may end up making these cross beams out of brass or aluminium, just because that makes that whole process much easier and more streamlined. When I was making this stool seat, my idea was to use these pieces of plywood and the pieces of walnut to replicate a piece of cloth, so to make it look as if it was woven. That was the idea. I like how it turned out. It doesn't really look woven, but it looks nice enough. Yeah, I'm quite happy with how it turned out.